and I'm going to share my screen. All right. So we talked on Monday about lists. Okay. And I introduced you guys to two new data types. One was a list. Does anyone remember the other one?
Dictionary.
A dictionary. Yeah. Now that was kind of an unofficial thing of me telling you guys about a dictionary. We'll go into that in more depth later. But in talking about lists, what are some things that we can do with lists? Why would I want to make one?
Easy recall of information.
Okay, yeah, it's a really great way to store a lot of like information. Great. What else? Why would I want to make a list?
You can kind of manipulate that list a lot easier when it's in a list format versus kind of just spelled out individually.
Yeah, for sure. Let's think about it another way. Let's say I was going to put my day and different things in my day that I've experienced into a list. Okay, I'll give you guys one example. For lunch today, I had a salad, and I could put the ingredients of that salad into a list. It had lettuce and spinach and corn and beans and ranch and barbecue sauce and chicken and tomatoes. All of that I could put into a nice list. Okay, it would make it really easy if I wanted to print all the contents of a salad, or if I wanted to modify it or share it or do anything with it. Okay, what are some other things that you guys have seen today that you could put into a list in Python?
School supplies.
School supplies. Yeah, great. Or if you like pack your backpack, what all you put in your backpack? What else?
Classes or like homework.
Yeah, classes or homework or your schedule. Any other ones?
Items needed for a construction job site.
Yeah, seriously, Gavin, that's great. Other things that you could put into a list from your day to day. My clothes, I could put those into a list. All the different clothes items that I'm wearing. Okay, well, great. Today we're going to talk more about how to access items in a list, finding the size of a list, iterating through a list using an index, printing indices, working with parallel lists, and removing items from a list. All right, working with numbers. To add to a list, we have that append function that we talked about. So anytime I have a list, it doesn't have to be named the list. It could be named anything as long as it was declared as a list. Now, just as a review from Monday, how do we declare a variable as a list data type?
Square brackets.
Square brackets. Yep, that's it. Let me pull up my text editor real quick. All right. And let me come into our class. Have my temp.py right here. So if I say age equals 20, we have a number, name equals Brandon, we have a string, and students equals, anytime I have this written in a Python program, that will make a list. Okay, right now, will this code run? Is there anything wrong with the code that I have right here?
No.
No. No, it'd be very similar to me saying name equals an empty string. Okay, just by putting the square brackets, I have made a variable. I have told Python that it's going to be a list data type. And then later on, if I want to do anything with students, I have all of these things available to it because it is a list. Okay, so I could say student.insert or student.count, student.append. So if I wanted to add, let's say, a string to this, name is a string data type, then I could just say, okay, I'll add name. Or I could add a string literal and say we have Doug in here as well. Okay, it doesn't make a difference to Python. Name has the value of Brandon in its location. Well, when I just append this, it's just one less step for Python to do. You know, it doesn't have to find where a variable's data is stored in memory. It has the data that you're putting in right now. Either way, it's a string. Okay. All right. To print this, let's just look at what this looks like again. I'll say print students, and then let's go ahead and run this. Open in terminal, I'll say py, temp.py. Okay. Oh, look at that. So students.append name. Oh, it's because, oh, okay. Yeah, it's because I took Brandon out of there. All right, let's leave Brandon in our name variable. And let's hit up arrow. Okay, that's what I was expecting. All right, questions on this, on appending to a list. Okay, last one here. Is this legal?
Yes.
I see some nods, okay? Now, when we say legal in programming, it basically means will it run? Will it run? Yes. Should it run? It's debatable, okay? I don't want to start throwing mixed data types into a list. Python won't have a problem with that, okay? I could even say, I could make a variable called salad ingredients equals, and then I have a nice list here, and I have lettuce and, oh, whoops. And we'll just say bacon because everyone wants bacon in a salad, and ranch. Okay, that sounds like an awesome salad. Okay, now I can say students.append and then we'll say salad ingredients. Okay, is this one legal? A nested list? A list inside of a list with a bunch of other data types? Ooh, oh, whoops, that's my typo. It even had the red line there, sorry guys. All right, red line's gone, that's a good sign. Okay, and there we go. Okay, here's my new list. Now, syntax-wise, it's just fine. Okay, it didn't throw any errors, my program ran, and it's great. Organizationally speaking, I would never want to do this. Okay, if I have any type of list, no matter what it's called, I could even call it random list and throw a bunch of stuff in there. I don't want to mix data types. We talked about this a little bit on Monday, but I'm stressing it again because errors will happen if you have mixed data types in here. For example, let's say I wanted to get bacon out of my salad ingredients that's in my student list. Okay, the easiest way to do that, or the most efficient way to do that, would be to loop through my students, and then for each student, go through in my salad ingredients list and grab the second item in there. Okay, then that would allow me to get the second ingredient in any salad ingredients list that I have. But if I tried that here with my students list, I'd get a big error because these data types are different. I don't have a list here, so I can't get the second ingredient out of this list. Same with these two. But right here, if I wanted to just print up a number or do math with like a number 5, I couldn't either. Okay, so having lists with mixed data types, while it is legal, you should never do it. Okay. All right, so there's some good practice with append. Let's come back over here. Removing from a list. Did anyone see how to do this? How do I remove something from a list?
Remove.
Okay, so we have a remove function. We also have a pop function. And I can look at this. Students is a list data type. So I'm going to type in students here and say dot. And let's see what we have. So we do have pop and remove. So let's just run them both and see what happens. So right here, we can remove the item at index 3 or just remove the last item. So let's give this a shot. And I'm just going to say, I'm going to remove the last item, which will get rid of my salad ingredients. Will live. Okay. So I'm going to come over here and let's print this one more time. Print students. And let's run it down here. Okay. So it effectively took off the last item that I put in this list. Okay, now let's try doing remove. Students dot, we have remove right here. Okay, let's see if it works the same way. All right, and let's run this again. Ooh, look at this. A remove takes exactly one argument, 0 given. Okay, so if I look at this in my text editor, nope, it's not giving me any help. It says remove, but that doesn't tell me anything about what arguments it needs. Where could I find this on how to use this remove? You guys are like, man, you ask me this like every single day. And it's true, I'll just Google it. Okay, so I'm gonna come over here and I'll say Python list remove. Okay, we could pick probably any single one of these. I'll do the W3 schools one. All right, and it looks like remove the banana element from the fruit list. So we have a list here. Look at that, they did all strings, good for them. Okay, and then I say what I want to remove out of it. Okay, remove method removes the first occurrence of the element with the specified value. And it does show this element is in here as required. Okay, now look at this though. It could be any type. All right, so if I wanted to remove my salad ingredients list, I could. It might be harder to write out than a number 5 or a banana string, but I can put any type into here. So let's give this a shot. So right here, after I popped our salad ingredients, I could say, all right, I want to remove Brandon from here. And I could say remove Brandon is stored in the variable name. So I could just type in name here. Let's see if that works. And I'll hit save, up arrow. And there we go. Here's our latest one. Brandon's gone. Okay, so it works pretty well. Just reviewing pop, what would happen if I put something into the parentheses here? What argument is pop expecting? Could I put Brandon's name in here?
Expecting the location of
No. Yeah, it's expecting an index. All right, so if I take this off, I'm just going to run this. Okay, so before we popped, we had 4 items in here. Okay, lists are always 0 based. So our indices here are going to be 0, 1, 2, and 3. So if I wanted to remove Brandon out of this one, I would say pop at index of 0, and then I could print students. Okay, and let's see if that worked. Okay, and it did. Brandon's gone again. All right, so 2 ways of removing. We have the pop function that will take an index as an argument if I know what index I need to remove from a list. And then we have the remove function, students.remove, and I could give it a value inside of here. That looks like an index. That's a little bit confusing. Let's put Doug in here. We'll remove Doug. Okay. Okay, any questions on removing stuff from lists? Sweet, well, let's keep going. All right, accessing items in a list via their index, okay? This should come as no surprise to you guys, but we have square brackets for our list anytime we want to declare a list, and I can access any specific item in a list with our bracket notation here. So let's stop deleting stuff out of here, and I'll just say print students at index of 2, okay? What is that print statement going to look like? Matthew, are you talking to us? You're on mute if you are.
I think it's just gonna print that third one. Is it 5 or is it lettuce, bacon, ranch?
It is 5. Let me make this a little bit bigger for you guys.
Yeah, so I think it's just gonna print 5 then.
Okay. There we go. All right, I'm gonna run this. I saved it. Okay, and yeah, so I was able to print something by a specified index, in this case 5. If I put a 3 here, it would just print our list in a list, our salad ingredients. Yeah, go ahead, Matthew.
So could you do the opposite of that? Say you have you want to find Doug, its index in a list. Can you do the opposite?
Ooh, that's a great question. So if I wanted to print the index of something in there, right? If I had a list of like, say, 1,000 things, and I'm like, I'm looking for Doug, I want to see what his ID is. Is that what you're asking? Okay, anyone know the answer to that question?
Index, dot index.
Ooh, all right. So let's look at dot index. So I'm going to open up our best friend here. I'm going to say Python list, and I'll say index. And let's see what we get here. I'll go to W3 schools again. And it says right here, index method returns the position of the first occurrence of a specified value. Okay, and so I have the name of a list, dot index, a function, and then I could put Doug in here, or my list of salad ingredients or something. Let's give it a shot. So I'm going to come down in here and I'll say print. We have our list name dot index, and then the parameter here is an item inside of my list. So I'll go ahead and say Doug, and let's run it. Okay, and it said index of 1. Okay, so I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to print students. Well, I guess we have it right here. So that's our full student list with all of our messed up data types. And then we printed our salad ingredients by saying students at index of 3. And then we were able to find what index Doug is at. Okay, now watch this. If I added, so we just said if we had like 1,000 items in a list and I wanted to find something in a list. So if I say students dot append Doug, and then I'll say print students. Okay, watch what happens. How many Dougs are we going to end up with in our students list? 5, okay. And what is this going to print up for us? 1. Yeah, this isn't going to change at all because this index function will find us and return the first index of a value that was found. Okay, so here's all of our Dougs. Doesn't matter that Doug is at index 4, 5, 6, and 7 now as well. It'll still just return that 1. Okay. So that begs the question. If I wanted to find how many instances of Doug was in here, Doug, sorry, we keep on saying your name. I hope we're not bugged. Okay. If I wanted to find how many instances of his name was in here, how would I do that? We go to Google, right? So I'm going to go over to Google and I'll say Python number of instances.
Okay, talk to me. Just ask what you want to know.
Thanks, Google. Python number of instances in list. How can I count the occurrences of a list item? In our case, Doug. Oh my heavens. Look at that. Let's try it. Okay, it looks like we got a nice count function that we could use along with our list. So I'm going to come back over here and we can leave all this. This time we're just going to say print students dot, what was it? Count. Okay, ooh, look at that. My text editor knows it exists. And then what do I want to count? Doug. All right, I save it. That's going to print it. Let's see what happens. Look at that. We didn't even have to loop through that or anything. We just had a nice count function. That's awesome. Okay, great. Any questions on anything you guys can see on the screen right now or anything else?
I
Yeah,
have
go
a
ahead,
question. Let's say you follow them along the list. Like, let's say there was a Doug A and a Doug C, but the list only contained first names, and you wanted to find the location of Doug C, so the second one. Is there a way you could specify that with the index function, or would you need to do something else?
So you're talking like a substring.
Yeah, like because the index function gets the first thing of Doug, but
Yeah.
I'm not looking for that one. I'm trying to find the second one. Is there a way to do that?
Interesting. Let's Google it. So I'm going to come over here. What would you guys Google to find that?
Could you say second iteration of name in list?
That sounds good to me.
Not
I would
count or
go-
something like that? I don't know. Or index?
I think that's great, Matthew. I'll throw Python in there first. We want our results to be in the right language. So anytime I do searches, I'll always put Python first. And then let's try it. Second iteration, maybe I'll say instance in a list of instance in list. Let's see what we get. Iterating through a list of objects. So that's a little bit deeper, okay? Remember our objects that we talked about? Each one has like a set of variables in it. So we don't want to worry about that right now. Recording all instances of a class. We don't want to worry about that either, okay? A class is like an object on steroids. It can have all sorts of variables and functions in it. Ways to iterate through a list. How to get all instances, how to iterate over an object's data. Okay, so let's try one thing. It looks like our iterate here might be throwing it off. So I'm gonna say Python second instance, maybe let's say of string, because we're looking for a string in here. We could probably use what we learned to find a number as well. Ooh, look at that, find the nth occurrence of a substring in a string. Interesting. Let's look at that. This might not be exactly what we want, but it might help us get there. Yeah, that is not quite what we want. So do you guys see what they're doing here? All these different answers are making functions. We have these def keywords. It's the exact same thing that we learned about the other day in this class, where if I want to make a function, I'll use the def keyword. Okay, and this one, for example, it's a pretty short function. You can pass in a string and a substring. So if I had Doug as a string, I could pass in G, and it will find the second occurrence of a substring in a string. Okay, and that's what this function does, and it will just return that. So it isn't exactly what we want, but it is interesting to note that all of these answers are creating their own functions. Okay, let's see though. Find the second occurrence of a given string. We have list, Python second instance. Let's say occurrence. I think that definitely got us closer to where we wanted to be. Whoops. I'm used to VS Code here. Python second occurrence in list. Let's take string out. I think that was throwing us off too. How to find the index of the nth time an item appears in a list. That sounds awesome. Do you guys agree? That sounds like exactly what we're looking for. Third time's the charm. Okay, we have a list. Each occurrence of S appears at the following indices. Okay, so let's look. Using list comprehension and enumerate. Okay, we haven't learned about enumerate yet. Let's see if there's stuff that we've only learned about. Return, nope, nope, nope. Look, they wrote a function too, and they're looping through it. It says for I, yeah, okay. Wow, they wrote a class for that. Okay, so we do have sort. That's not going to help us find a specific instance. So let's go up to the top here, and let's just try one of these. Okay, so if we have a list, in this case, our list is named X. We can call this anything. Okay, X is our list. I know that because this is with square brackets. Okay, and then it says I for I, n in enumerate X, if n is equal to S at index of 0, that'll print up 2 and 3 and 4 and 7. Okay, so there are a lot of different ways to solve this problem. We could make a chunk of code to do it for us with a simple loop without using enumerate. Someone might look at this and be like, wow, I have no idea what that's doing. Okay, we could go and read about enumerate, and that'd be great. But we're not really going to touch enumerate in this class at all. So if you want to find something at a certain index, a really simple way that you could do it. So we already have how to get the first index of something, right? So if I wanted to find, if I knew that my count was greater than 1. So right here we saw that count was equal to 5. What we could do is I could say, all right, I'm going to loop through, and for every time that I find Doug, I will increase my count. okay? And then we could say, without using other functions or anything, we could just say, all right, the first time it prints is an index of 1. The next time it'll be index of 4, and then 5, and then 6. Yeah, I don't know if that helps, Matt or Ian. I feel like that was an awesome question. I'm afraid there isn't a super simple answer for it. We could write up some code for it right now. I don't want to scare people, but how are you feeling?
That answers. I was just wondering,
Okay.
like, okay, is there index 2 that would look for this? But with Python, there's a lot of ways to go around things.
Yeah, yeah, seriously. If there's one thing that you guys learned from this class, one thing, if it's like the only thing, it's not my good dad jokes, okay? It is how to use Google. That's why I'm always Googling stuff for you guys, okay? If you guys can just learn how to do what we just did, we didn't get this on the first try. It was our third try of trying to type this out, okay? But being able to see is like, oh yeah, that iteration kind of threw things off. And I had string in here, and it was just finding substrings in a string, you know, and that was throwing things off. But the third time that we did this, we said Python second occurrence in list. It was the very first thing that came up. Okay, so being able to use Google to find what you need in programming, no matter what language, no matter what class, that is seriously like the most important skill that I feel like you can get from this class, from any class really. Because when you're working in a job and you're getting paid to do stuff like this, you're on Google like 24/7 because you can't ask anyone questions. You're just there doing it. And so you Google stuff and then you learn little tricks for how to Google things with more efficiency. All right. Oh, that's not us. Hang on. Where'd we go here? There we are. All right. Finding the size of a list. Well, we kind of did that one already. Oh, no, we did count. All right. So we have the len function. I think we've looked at the len function before. All right. But let's look at it real quick. So I have students. Oh, I'm getting stuff in the chat here. Thanks, Felipe. All right. So let's try the len function. If I don't know how to use it, we'll just go to Google. Okay. I'll say Python len, and maybe I'll put something up. Oh, look at that. Len of a list. Okay. We have tutorials point, Stack Overflow. I was going to see if there was a W3 Schools here thing here, but there's not. So I'll just click on the first one here. Len, following syntax for len method. It looks like you can pass a list straight into it. If you look at my slide here, we did the same thing. If movies is a list, we can just pass that list into the len function and it returns the number of elements in a list. Okay, so one example here, we have len of list 1 and it prints 3. Okay, let's try it with our students list. I'm just going to say we're not assigning this to a variable, so I'll just print len of list name, which is students, and let's see what happens. Okay, here's 8. Okay, and now I could count these. I could be like, oh yeah, there's 7 commas in here. Okay, but here's our length. Now, one thing to note, let's count this real quick. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that was right. The len function works. Glad the Python guys knew what they were doing. But what is the last index in my list? 7. Thank you, Ian. Yeah, lists are always 0 based. So if I wanted to print up Brandon, I would say list at index of 0. If I wanted to print up our last Doug, we'll say, for this last one, we'll say Doug, last but not least. Okay. If I wanted to print up that one, then I would have to do our list.length, or the length of our list, which is 8 minus 1. Okay, so if at any point I want to print up the last item of a list, so let me just come in here, I'll say print, and I'll say students. Well, let's try it like this. I'm going to say the length of students, just like we did before, and then I'll say minus 1. Okay, now if this works the way that I'm wanting it to, it will give me an index. In this case, it gave me 7. So that worked because that is the index of the last value in my list. Now, if I wanted to print what was at that value, how would I do that?
Can't you just like put it in between the brackets, but put -1?
Yeah, So earlier, look, we did students at index of 3. Well, I can do that exact same thing right here. So I'm just going to copy this line, and I'm just going to say students at index of whatever our math ends up being. Okay. So earlier I said students at index of 3. Now I'm saying students at index of length of students minus 1. Okay, so we're kind of just building on this, right? We could get the length of the students, which would give us the length of the entire list, which was 8. And then I could say, okay, I want the last item in the list, so I'll subtract 1 from that, which gives us 7. And so once this math is done, we're basically going to say, all right, the length is going to be 8. 8 minus 1 is 7. And then we have students at index of 7. Let's see if it works. If it works, what is this going to print?
Dog last not belong, but not least.
Yeah, so let's see. Okay, and there we go. All right, so you guys can kind of see how we've used these functions to work with this data, okay, to find how many instances of a string there were in here, to find the last item, to find the total count in the list, okay? Any questions on this, you guys? Sweet, let's keep going. All right, iterating through a list using index. So we have LDS hymns for I in range. So check this out. We have length, the len function that we just used, of LDS hymns. All right, if I just count out my commas, I have 3 commas, which means I'll have a length of 4. Okay, and so if I say I in range, range is going to return, or this length of LDS hymns is going to return 4. And this range function will allow us to just iterate through this list. So we say for I in range, hymn equals LDS hymns at index of I, and then we'll print hymn. So let's try this with our students now, okay? So I'm gonna put a comment in here. I'm gonna say we're gonna iterate through our list and print everything. All right, so we're gonna say for I in range, and what's our range?
Isn't it just a list?
So we could try that. Let's try putting students in here and let's see what happens. I'm just going to say print students at index of I. Okay. And I'm going to hit up arrow and run it. Ooh, check that out. List object cannot be interpreted as an integer. So for our range, we need to get something that is an integer here.
You just do student len.
Yep. So we'll do exactly what we did right here. Okay. This length of students returned like 8, right? There were 8 things there. And so if I put that inside the range function, then it'll basically be like, all right, I is going to be equal to 0 to hit the first item in my list. And while I is less than 8, which is the range, then we'll go ahead.
In the range, though, don't you need a 0 comma and then the ending number, or is that not necessary?
Let's Google it. Okay. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say Python range, and let's see what we can find about this range function. That is super powerful. Okay. So right here we have range of 6. So let's look at this real quick. Just putting that 6 in there, we get just a numbered list. So we can see exactly what range it's doing. Okay. For n and x, we'll print n, and it went from 0 to 5. So basically like assigning n to 0 and saying, well, n is less than whatever I'm putting in here, 6, then we'll print everything in there. All right. Looking at my students list, right here, I say, okay, the length of my students list is 8. And so we'll say I is 0 to start with, and while 0 is less than 8, or while I is less than 8, we'll go ahead and print this. Now, there are some more things that you can do with this. Okay, look at this. There are 3 parameters or arguments right here, and we have only used 1. Okay, so we have a required parameter, which is the stop parameter, but we also have 2 optional ones. Okay, the first one is a starting point. So by default, our range function had to start at 0, which is the most common. Okay, But let's say I wanted to find the second index of a string in a list. Okay, like we talked about earlier. I could use this range function. Okay, if I found the first index and it was index of 3, then I could do my range function and say range, and then my 2 parameters could be 3 to start index of 3, and then my stop point would be the length of a list. And then it would find the next index of a string that I wanted to find. Okay, so that's an optional parameter. And this stop one's required, like I said, most commonly when you use range, you're going to go through an entire list. But lots of times you want more flexibility than that. And then our last one here, an integer specifying the incrementation. So let's say I wanted to print up all the odd numbers less than 1,000. Okay, well, that would be really simple. Let me comment this out. We don't need that for now. And we're going to do odd numbers up to 1,000. I'll just say for I in range 1,000, and we'll increment by 2. And actually, let's say our starting point is 1, because 1's an odd number, 0 is not. Okay, so we have for I in range, and I'm saying I'm going to go from 1 to 1,000, and we're going to jump up by 2s. Well, if I start off at 1, that'll give me all my odd numbers, and I'll just say print I. Okay, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller just so it doesn't blow my terminal. Not that I can't handle it. It would just make it a lot to scroll through. Okay, here's my odd numbers up through 10. Okay, and if I wanted to make that 100, it'd be really easy. It'll still go just about as fast as it did before. It'll just spit it out. Okay, and there's all the odd numbers. Okay, if I wanted to find all the multiples of 4, well, maybe I'd start off at 4 and say I want to go up by 4, and I'd run it again. And here's all of my multiples of 4 less than 100. So pretty powerful, right? This range function, that's incredible, because in every other programming language that exists, you have to write more code if you want to print up all the odd numbers or something. Okay, it's a very similar thought process that you have to go through, but it's also more complicated in how you have to write it. Okay. All right, let's go back to this guy, iterate through our list and print everything in our list. So right here, length of students is going to return 8. So we're going to say we're going to go from 0 to 8 in our range. And then we're just going to print students at whatever index that we're at. So let's print first. Let's just print I right here. And let's watch what happens. I'm going to take that out. We don't need that anymore. Okay. So here's our range that we're going to go through, 0 through 7. Now, if I put those numbers into the square brackets like I did up here, then we're going to print everything inside of our list, not just the indices. So I'm going to say students at index of I, and let's see what happens. Okay. And there's all of our stuff. All right. Any questions on this, you guys? Okay.
I had a.
Yeah, go ahead, Elijah.
Wouldn't it be easier to do just for I and students and then print I, because it'll go take each element of student and then print the individual element rather than getting going and get.
Yeah. So let's try that. Okay. So I'm gonna comment this out for now, and let's try using our for loop on students instead of on a range. Okay. So I'm gonna say I in students, and now if we just print I, let's see what happens. Look at that. Okay, it did the exact same thing. We didn't have to use range. Okay, there's less code here than there is here. Okay, there may be more flexibility with the range, but if all I'm going for is just to print up everything in a list, this is awesome, because my for loop can very easily iterate through a list or a dictionary or other data types that are in Python. Okay, we could even do the same thing if I had a string. We'll say big word equals supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Okay, and I will just say for I in big word, Okay, I can even loop through a word, a string. Could I do that with a number? What would happen if I did that with a number? Any thoughts? Any guesses? Will it break? Will it print up each digit? Will it count up to 6 billion? Will it give me an error and not even let me do it? Let's see what this red arrow says. Int, not iterable. Value big number is used in an iterating context. Okay, so we can't loop through numbers. If I ran this, we would just see that exact same error come up over here saying that that's not iterable. Okay, but I can very easily loop through lists and strings and dictionaries and other things. Okay. All right, you guys, any last words before I let y'all go? Okay, you'll find in the next few days, you're just working with lists again. Use Google. Google's your best friend. It's my best friend too, not to make me sound like lonely, but okay. Google's amazing. So anytime you're wondering about something, just be like, okay, how do I get the count of a list? Or how do I do this with a list? And anytime you're working with Python lists, just Google Python list number of something, and that'll help. So, all right, you guys, have an awesome day.
I take care, Brother Birch. Thank you.
Thank you guys. See you later.
Brother Bush, you got a question before you go?
Yeah, go ahead.